Jad's obviously a unique MDS patient because of his age.
I'm 30 now. I was diagnosed when I was 26.
So, but then when you look at the grand scheme of the experience that he had as well, it really highlights sort of, you know, both those physical as well as those emotional challenges that you have. And despite the steroid burning bridges, having those support networks around that help give you strength on those days where you don't feel.
Absolutely. I was asked by the foundation to come and speak today on National MDS Day, and I myself now, and I'm an MDS survivor. I was diagnosed with MDS in 2011, and I had a bone marrow transplant in 2012. When I was asked by the foundation to come and talk today, I said yes, knowing that I would have to get up in front of people and actually talk. And that is one of my phobias, that and needles, go figure. I faced the needle one fairly well, and today I know my story is one of hope, really. When I was originally diagnosed, I was told I had to have a bone marrow transplant. And I was fortunate enough to be able to speak with a woman who was about 6 months down the track post her transplant, and just that 5-minute hospital passing conversation really encouraged me just to see someone had been through the treatment and had survived the first few weeks in hospital and was actually released and had gone home and was continuing on with her day treatment. So in saying that, everyone in this room has a story, and I'd like to share a little bit of mine with you now. In 2011, I was diagnosed with MDS. It was found just through a routine blood check. My results came back that my blood groups were all quite low, some of them that the doctor was showing before. My platelets were down to 3, which is really low. I think the normal range is between 150, 450. And so yeah, I was had nothing there. When I was diagnosed, I was told that I had a form of MDS called, I'll ask the doctor here if this is right, monosomy 7. I was missing chromosome 7, and chromosome 7, now I know there's a doctor in the room, I have to make sure I'm saying this right, is responsible for production of healthy blood in your sort of body. My chromosome 7 was gone, so to get back chromosome 7, I had to have a transplant. And when I was told this diagnosis, originally I was asymptomatic. I actually didn't notice all the symptoms that someone may have had when they were given that type of news. So I wasn't bruising, I had energy, I wasn't suffering from like weight loss or anything, so it took me a while to really come to terms with my diagnosis. And so I actually took a year off and tried some natural remedies and medicines, and that really gave me time to come to terms with what I may have to eventually do if I can't beat it this way. And what that 1 year did for me was I did get my body into a really good condition food-wise. I was eating organically, removed sugar and dairy, gluten, having lots of vitamins and stuff. Meditating, spiritual healing, lots of little things. And eventually my family encouraged me to go back and have another bone marrow aspirate and have a look at my bone marrow and see where my cancer was at now. And it had now sort of moved towards AML. It had now sort of gone, I think I had blast cells at about 0.04% when I was originally diagnosed, and they'd now moved towards 4%. And so it was getting closer to AML, and the doctors did say that if I didn't treat it now, it'd be a little harder to treat once it turns to AML. So I that day decided to have the bone marrow transplant and said yes to even myself, really. I said yes, this is what I have to do now. That was the day that I accepted that this was my reality, and you cannot argue with reality, you can only accept it. And when I did that, I sort of gave way to fear and just said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be as positive as I can, not just for myself, but for my network around me of my family, friends, And I was put into the bone marrow registrar to find a match for me because none of my 3 siblings were a match. 2 of them were a match for each other, which is good to know, but not for me. And about 2 weeks later, I received a phone call from the hospital saying, "We found a match for you." And I've now since found out that it actually was from a 50-year-old woman in Perth. So I do have female blood now. I have 3 sisters, and I've always said I wanted a brother, so instead I became a sister. It's on camera, so I can show that hopefully later. So I was then called and told we had a match. I had to then go through and have my Hickmans inserted, which you saw was the tubes that went into my chest. And that's just to connect you to all the medicines and drugs that go into your body. And then I had 2 days of intensive chemotherapy, really heavy dose over 2 days. And then I had 6 sessions of total body irradiation. And after that, I knew what it felt like to be sick. I actually felt horrible. And the day after that, I had the transplant. And that was day 1. And the transplant itself is just a bag of blood, really. It's a bag of stem cells. And even though it's not like a kidney or a lung transplant where it's something really physical, it's just going through intravenously into your Hickmans, it's still like it's a really big day. And I knew when I was looking at this bag of blood that this has to save my life. It took about 12 days from the day that I received the stem cells for the transplant to come to life in my bone marrow. And it just showed up on my neutrophils one day. That was for 12 days it was 0.00, 0.00, and then it came up one day as a little blip of 0.12, and that signified that it had come to life in me. And the doctor shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, you've transgrafted," I believe is the term. And so after that, I developed something called mucositis, which is a side effect of some of the drugs that you have to get. I think it's called methotrexate. And that causes ulcers in your mouth, and pretty much from your mouth all the way down your stomach to your bowels. And if you've ever had one ulcer, you know they're painful, but unfortunately, yeah, they're like 50-cent size ulcers, and I couldn't swallow for a good 3 weeks, not even like my own saliva or eat or drink, so I was fed through my Hickmans into my blood. Eventually that went away, and I was told if I could stomach enough calories, my blood was doing well enough now that I could go home. And so a week later I was at home. I had a few more trips in and out of hospital just with temperatures and a few more stays, and my Hickmans got infected, so they had to pull that out, and I had to go back to my cannulas and needles and get used to that again. Then came the Light the Night 2012, a really great event that the foundation puts on, and I walked in that in 2012, and it's a really good night. Just to be there and see other people holding up their white lanterns that have also been through, going through, or 10 years past going through something like this gave me hope. And I did it last year, and we'll be doing it again this year. And then unfortunately after that, within a few weeks, I developed something called Graft-versus-host disease of the lungs. Graft-versus-host disease is where the stem cells that I was given sort of started to wage a war with my old immune system, and it can attack you in your skin, your mouth, your bowels, or your gut, or your lungs. And unfortunately mine attacked my lungs, so I started to, almost felt like I was being strangled inside. And every time I stood up I collapsed, and so it turned out that a good 3/4 of each of my lungs had blistered away, is what the doctors said, and that I would most probably be on oxygen for the rest of my life. So, no treatment. I was put on a steroid to help combat the graft-versus-host disease, and that in itself, the side effects of the steroid are heavy. I think that was mentally the most exhausting part of my transplant, was being put on this steroid. Even though it did its good with my lungs, it does eat your muscle mass and cause the rash on my body, but it psychologically it's almost like, I don't do drugs, but it's almost like a drug that people would use recreationally or something to sort of just speed your brain up. And I became almost psychotic to the point that I know I couldn't talk well with people in my own environment, so I was burning a lot of bridges. And I remember my mother and I arguing, and I literally just carried her out of my house because she touched a bottle of water. So it's just, that's the side effect of the steroids. It did work though, obviously. My lungs recovered. I took the oxygen off after a few weeks and showed the doctors that I could breathe without it. And then after GVH, oh, that's right, I had to have a bronchoscopy, which was to look into my lungs and take a biopsy of my lung to look for the GVH and just to correctly diagnose it. And unfortunately, when they did that, it punctured my whole lung. And so I started seeping air out of my lung, and with every breath it was filling me up like the Marshmallow Man, really. And it felt like crackly to touch. And with every breath, my lung was actually collapsing, so they said we'd have to put rods in you to desaturate the oxygen that you're not absorbing back into yourself. And we'll do that on Monday, and it was a Friday, and the doctors maybe wanted the weekend off. They said they'd put me on observations over the weekends, and unfortunately over that weekend I picked up gastro and influenza. And so in one sort of spate I had gastro, influenza, the pneumothorax of the lung with the air coming out, the graft-versus-host disease of the lung, which I was on oxygen for, and I was put back on immunosuppressants for my fledgling new immune system. And that was the first time I really thought, how are you going to beat all this? But I have, I guess. I'm still here. And it was just, I didn't, even on the Monday the doctors came in and said, we don't need to put the rods in you. You've managed to reabsorb it enough. We'll just monitor you so you can go home. And so I finally got to go home again. And it's just been a long, slow journey since. This is, I'm trying to say, it is a success story, because even though I've said all those sort of horrible things that happened to me, I've come through them all. And recently I had a lung function test on my lungs, and this is just something that they do just to check the volume of your lungs, the amount you transfer gas in the atmosphere into oxygen into your blood. And they did one of these before I did my transplant, just to have a base reading of my lungs. Then when I got the graft-versus-host disease, they checked it again, and it had dropped by a good 2/3 all over. And 2 weeks ago I did my lung function test, and I'm actually 10% better now than I was before I did the transplant. So I think just the power of positive thought and good attitude speaks a lot here. I still receive monthly treatment. I get topped up with something called immunoglobulin, or globulin, which is just a blood product that helps you fight infection, I believe. I am producing that, but just not enough of it for myself yet, so I still have once a month top-ups and checkups with my doctor, and my platelets that were down to 3 before I had the transplant are still slowly climbing up now, and they're about 130 now, so they're climbing to normal, but the rest of my blood groups that were all low have come back to the normal range now. And as of last week, I've been taking off everything together, like I'm not on any medicine anymore, so... There was at one stage I was on about 60 tablets a day. As some people may know, you take a lot of tablets once you go through a lot of this stuff. But now I just take vitamins, so I've rushed that a bit, but that is my story. They did my liver and kidneys, with a lot of the treatment I was going through, did sort of spike up in different levels that I would then have my doctors readjust my medicine to sort of let the levels come back to normal. But all my other organs, everything's in its normal range. My heart, kidneys, the liver. So
when you were going through the process, were you also using alternative methods as well, or that was disallowed because of the...
It wasn't somewhat disallowed. It depends what your method is. My method really was, I just changed my diet. I cut out a lot of sugar, all sugar altogether. I cut out sugar. I cut out dairy, and I cut out gluten, and I ate,
celiac, so...
and I just ate as as almost caveman-ish as possible, back in the just everything natural, raw, organic, and I made sure I kept my life as stress-free as possible. I did a lot of things daily, just walking around and being out, and even to get back to the physical sort of state I am now. I started off by just walking in my flat, just the length of this room perhaps, and then I stretched it up and down the side of the house, and this is all over a slow, gradual period. And then I managed to walk around the house, and then I'd walk halfway down the street to the park, and then the whole way to the park, and I had to call once to get picked up because I couldn't get back up the hill. But I've just slowly pushed myself, but within my limits, not to any extreme that I'd cause harm, to put this behind me and to prove to myself that I can get a normal life back again, and that I can breathe on my own again, and that I can find me again. But this is a new me now. Once you go through something like this, you change no matter what you say. You're a different person, different beliefs. You take, you don't sweat the small stuff anymore. There is nothing really that worth worrying about unless it's something like this.
Do you still get graft-versus-host?
I don't now. There is a chance that it can come back.
And I'm still getting graft-versus-host to the point of where it's pretty severe this last 12 months. So
I haven't had it come back since I had it treated for my lungs, and I didn't get it anywhere else on me.
It hasn't attacked any of my organs, just
the skin. Yeah, that's a it's the more common one I've heard is the skin. But yeah, unfortunately enough, it hasn't come back. And I've been taken off all medicine now, and that was one of the heavy drugs, the tacrolimus, which is an immunosuppressant. I was taken off that 3 months ago, and then my doctors waited to see how my lungs would fare without the suppressant in my body, and then we sent me for the test on my lungs 2 weeks ago to see if I can stay off the tacro, because he was just hoping to see that they were the same as they were, at least when I was on it. But it came back that I was better than before I even did the whole transplant, so he said you can stay off the tacro. Did you have the steroids at all?
I'm still on steroids.
Did you notice any side effects of that?
Oh, terrible.
Is it prednisone?
Yeah. Yes.
I was on about 100 plus milligrams.
150.
Yeah, and insomnia? No sleeping?
Terrible.
No sleeping. No sleeping.
No sleeping.
I developed severe OCD.
Muscles have disappeared.
Your muscles go away, you're fatigued, I had
and
a
I'm
horrible rash.
tired all the time.
Yeah, I had all. And every day that you start to think you might get better, you have to take another dosage.
That's
And it's
right.
back in your system again. And I was gardening and raking, and I was not allowed to do anything, and I was out. I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop. I literally needed to handcuff myself to stop me moving. I think I had about 50 plus nights of 2 hours a night. And every day I knew I wanted to sleep. And I almost, as the term would almost be coming down, where I'm like, I can sleep now. It's like 10 or 11 in the morning. I feel like I could go to sleep, and then I'd have to have another dose of them, and I would be for half an hour almost crying, saying, I don't want what's coming, and you can't help it.
No.
Bang, you're on it again, and you're just moving, talking, annoying people. And given that I had my lung issue, I was supposed to rest, and so I was cutting down trees so I could see city views, and I was 50 kilos, and I shouldn't have been doing this. And the doctors were saying, stop it, you're literally going to kill yourself in your backyard by just not stopping. So I'd literally have to say to myself, Jad, stop, go and sit down. And if I sat, I could feel my heart was just saying, like, rest. But really, once I was discharged and I could go home, I was in a sterile environment. I had to wear gloves if I was going out into the garden, or anywhere near sort of thing, like, because I think any bacteria or any infections, because you've got a new immune system. I mean, even now, my transplant I had was May the 5th, 2012, and so I have the equivalent of a 2-year-old and 2-month-old immune system.
What about now? Like, can you surf? Can you do all those sorts of
I actually surfed just yesterday, so I've come down from Noosa to do this. Fortunately, I can. That's part of my treatment. My healing treatment is I actually body surf instead, but I like surfing. But even now, with where the water is and how cold it is, it's still perfect. That and tennis. So.
What, in a couple of words, would you give some advice to him when he goes home? How to transition back into, life, basically? Because
it's sort of it is a slow process.
It's slow.
It is a slow process. It's huge. I mean, you learn also who your friends are when you go through something like this.
That's what I
Some people really amaze you that you maybe didn't make enough time for at the beginning, and they've come out and they're just glowing at you, and you're just like, wow, like, thank you. And now I'm great friends with these people.
Did you go back into study or work straight away?
No, even now, I'm not back into full-time work. I've just started working part-time in my father's advertising company up at Noosa. So sort of I thought I'd have a destination change. I was in Baden, Brisbane, and I chose to sort of go somewhere scenic now and do something a little different.
So you just focused on the physical and...
The physical. It was all really, That's it, and it's also you're forced to have to take a lot of time out. So you've got to find something to do with your time.
And that's what I'm sort of...
I played a lot of video games, and I had my connection playing games where I could actually put a little headset in and would talk to people that were playing the same game.
And that's what exactly...
And that was my connection to the world, because they had no idea that I was boy in a bubble at home, and I felt normal, really. No one knew.
But you didn't focus on sort of study or like...
music, to be honest. I taught myself to play the piano. So, I do that now, and I sort of do that as a hobby now, and I record a lot of music now, and I've got a lot of people saying, do something with that, because it's all pretty cool.
Did you find your friends change from that time? Did you,
Yeah.
as you...
Some did, some didn't. They changed with me. I mean, it's sort of, everyone now sort of appreciates, I'm not just saying me, they appreciate me more, but we sort of appreciate everyone a lot more, because it came so close to sort of realising I wasn't going to be here. And so we're all, I was told at 26 I probably may not make 30 if I didn't do the transplant. And so when I turned 30 recently, I wasn't like, oh damn, I'm so old, I turned 30. I'm like, I turned 30. Every day is kind of like my birthday now. I feel pretty grateful to be here every day.
Do you still take vitamins and minerals of some form?
Yeah, I do. Just multivitamin, zinc, magnesium, because I do a lot of, I go to the gym now and I'm running. And I eat clean.
I'd like to thank you, Jag, with what obviously is an emotional and shows your depth of strength and bravery to come up here and speak and share your story.